I still remember the sound, the low metallic click of my neighbor's mailbox as it slammed shut, the morning paper folded inside. On the front page, in letters too calm for what they meant, were the words, "Lehman Brothers files for bankruptcy." I stared at it and thought, how did it come to this? How did a country that once believed home ownership was the safest dream end up watching that dream burn, house by house, street by street? Back then, in 2008, I wasn't an economist or a banker. I was just an ordinary American, one of millions, living inside a story that was quietly unraveling. And only later did I realize the crisis didn't begin with a collapse. It began with a promise. In the early 2000s, America felt unstoppable. The Cold War was history. The internet was booming. Credit flowed like water. And homes, those solid symbols of stability, seemed like the safest bet anyone could make. I bought my house in 2004. A modest two-story place in a suburb outside Phoenix. The mortgage broker shook my hand, smiled wide, and said, "Congratulations, you're building wealth." I didn't even need to prove much. No thick folder of documents, no grilling questions, just signatures and optimism. Everyone I knew was buying. My coworker flipped houses on weekends. My cousin bought a second home as an investment. Even people who'd never saved a dollar suddenly owned properties worth hundreds of thousands. The banks encouraged it. Don't worry about the rate adjusting later. Home prices always go up. You can refinance before it resets. At barbecues, people didn't talk about baseball anymore. They talked about square footage, resale value, and how much equity they'd made while sleeping. It felt like magic. What we didn't see, what I couldn't see, was that this magic was built on paper, debt, and belief rather than reality. Looking back, the first cracks were invisible. Banks weren't just lending money anymore, they were selling it. My mortgage didn't stay with the local bank. It was bundled together with thousands of others and turned into something called a mortgage-backed security. Then those securities were sliced, repackaged, rated AAA, and sold to investors across the world. I didn't understand that at the time. All I knew was my monthly payment was low, for now. The real problem was risk. Or rather, how risk was being ignored. Banks began lending to people who clearly couldn't afford the homes. These were called subprime mortgages, but that word didn't reach my street. What reached us were phrases like no income verification, zero down payment, teaser rates. People were no longer buying homes to live in, they were buying homes to sell. And why not? Prices had only gone one direction, up. Behind the scenes, Wall Street was making billions by turning shaky loans into safe investments. Credit rating agencies blessed them. Regulators looked away. Everyone got paid, so no one asked hard questions. It was like stacking dominoes higher and higher while convincing ourselves gravity had been canceled. The first sign something was wrong came quietly. A house 2 streets down went into foreclosure. Then another. At first, people said, it's just a few bad borrowers. But then the reset letters arrived. My mortgage rate adjusted upward, so did my neighbors. Monthly payments jumped hundreds of dollars overnight. Suddenly, families who had barely scraped by before were drowning. I remember sitting at my kitchen table late at night, calculator in hand, realizing refinancing wasn't an option anymore. Home prices had stopped rising, some had begun to fall. And once prices fell, everything changed. People owed more than their homes were worth. Walking away started to feel rational. Foreclosures surged, banks took losses, investors panicked. What most of us didn't know was that Wall Street had layered derivatives on top of those mortgages, especially something called credit default swaps, essentially insurance bets on failure. When mortgages began to fail, those bets exploded. Fear spread faster than facts. September 2008. I will never forget that week. Lehman Brothers, 158 years old, collapsed. Bear Stearns had already fallen. AIG was gasping for air. Banks stopped trusting each other. Credit froze. It wasn't just bankers losing money anymore. It was everyone. My company announced layoffs. Friends lost jobs within weeks. Retirement accounts lost decades of savings in months. The stock market didn't fall, it plunged. I remember standing in a grocery store aisle, staring at shelves, suddenly aware that the system I'd trusted, work hard, buy a home, save for retirement, was shaking at its core. People asked, how could the smartest financial minds in the world let this happen? The truth was uncomfortable. They didn't just let it happen, they built it. Greed met complacency. Innovation outpaced regulation. Risk was disguised as safety, and when reality finally showed up, the entire structure collapsed under its own weight. The government stepped in with massive bailouts, not because banks deserved saving, but because letting them all fall would have pulled the entire global economy into the abyss. It felt unfair. Ordinary people lost homes and jobs, while institutions were rescued. Trust was shattered. By 2009, my neighborhood was quieter. Lawns went unmowed. Windows were boarded. For sale signs leaned crooked in the dirt. I kept my house, but barely. Many didn't. Years later, the economy recovered. Regulations tightened. Banks became more cautious, but the scars remain. The 2008 financial crisis didn't start with a single bad decision. It started with a story we told ourselves, that markets always self-correct, that housing prices only rise, that debt doesn't matter if everyone believes. As someone who lived through it, here's the lesson I carry. When an entire system is built on the assumption that nothing can go wrong, that's exactly when everything will. The crisis began in America, but it echoed around the world. And it wasn't just a financial collapse. It was a collapse of trust, of illusion, of the idea that growth without limits is possible. Every time I see a new boom, a new can't-fail opportunity, I think back to 2008 and the quiet morning when a newspaper headline told me that the dream had finally woken up. And it asked us all the same question. Have we really learned, or are we just telling ourselves a new story?